wasn't until 3 o'clock that the aircraft were finally scrambled, so 3 hours had passed, during which time the objects were picked up simultaneously by the National Tower, by the Air Route Traffic Control Center, and by Andrews Air Force Base once. In other words, they all showed the same objects at the same time, moving in the same general directions. There were visual sightings of objects from Andrews Air Force Base, from Bolling Air Force Base, and even from the tower at Washington National. At the tower at Washington National, they described an object that looked like a saucer or a cigar-shaped thing with light just streaming out of the bottom. At Andrews Air Force Base around 12 midnight, 12:15 or so, people who were outside the base, right outside the tower there, were walking around, and they said they saw a large ball of fire. Ruppel talks about this in his book. And this ball of fire had a tail to it, and it moved in an odd circular pattern. And they saw that repeated twice. They couldn't explain it. There were many sightings of objects on the ground. Now, let's see what my next slide is here. Okay, well, I'm not going to get to it. This is, again, a depiction of how the radar scope looked. You can see the dots down there clustering around the Capitol, I guess this is. This is just the airfield. Here's the Capitol, here's the White House. It just sort of shows how they looked. Here was an object making a right angle turn, another object going back on itself, I guess. It's just kind of interesting. There's two of that one. This is the depiction of what somebody at Andrews Air Force Base claimed to have seen. This fellow was out patrolling. He was a guard or a security man, and he saw a large object, well, larger than a star. This artist's rendition maybe made the effect here of the UFO a little bit bigger maybe than it was in reality. But he saw the thing go from red to orange to green and back to red again. But at the same time, he distinctly said there was a star that I could see. So this thing did not appear to be a star. He wasn't being misled by things that were already out there in the night sky. Oh, excuse me. Now, around 1 o'clock in the morning, there's a scheduled airline flight leaving from the National Airport, which was captained by a fellow, Casey Pierman. Casey Pierman has something like 17 years of pilot experience prior to that night. His co-pilot, Charles Wheaton, as they're sitting on the runway at National Airport there, Pierman suddenly sees a bluish-white light sweep across his field of view, like from the left hand to the right hand. He didn't know what to make of that. Thought it was a meteor, actually. And at that point, nobody had told him what was going on. He takes off shortly thereafter, and he's immediately in contact with Harry Barnes at the tower, who says, hey, we have a bunch of unknowns we've been following up here. We want you to monitor the airspace around you. Tell us if you see anything. And he was headed to Detroit via Pittsburgh and Martinsburg, West Virginia. So he was headed sort of west and north. Well, no sooner is Pierman up in the sky than he sees an object, as his co-pilot does, flash by him off the right-hand side, just vanishes into the distance. They see several other objects that Harry Barnes vectors him in onto. So the visual sightings exactly matched up with the sightings that Harry Barnes and his crew were monitoring at that time at National Airport. When the objects vanished from Casey Pierman's sight, they simultaneously vanished from the radar scopes as well. So we had a complete correspondence between the kind of objects that we're seeing. This is just a document here from the time. What I've tried to do in this lecture to you today is to draw upon period documents. I didn't use anything too contemporary here, aside from the artist's depictions here. But I used government documents to the extent I could to back up everything I'm saying. This talks about Charles Wheaton observing the objects I just saw. And in part E here, I know you probably can't read that, but about that says, immediately upon sighting Charlestown, Captain Pierman and his co-pilot observed a brilliant bluish-white light flash past from high over his left and disappear in level dead flight ahead, traveling at a tremendous rate of speed, and appeared to be outside the Earth's atmosphere. Who knows about that last part? They calculated those objects as traveling at about 7,000 miles per hour. That appears in accounts at the time. Another sighting from a person at Andrews Air Force Base, and again, an artist's depiction of this. A man saw a security personnel again saw a whitish silver object emit 3 reddish objects traveling east, I think it was. This is really what will cause hairs to rise on your neck if you realize that last year at Houston Intercontinental Airport, a pilot taking off saw the exact same thing, only instead of the objects going horizontal, it fired 2 red balls down toward the ground. And this was just last August. So another security breach there that we should be aware of. Like I said, around 3 o'clock, aircraft showed up in the area. Very strange that once the aircraft showed up, all the activity of the objects vanished. They disappeared from all radar scopes. They even sometimes seemed to move when various commands were given to the pilots to travel in a certain direction. The objects would seem to move away as though they were monitoring the air-to-air communications, ground-to-air communications, excuse me. When the aircraft arrived, all the objects vanished. When the aircraft left, objects came back on the radar scopes. In this case, I could find no evidence, even though I went and wrote about these 2 aircraft at 3 a.m. as being Air Force planes. I now think they were Navy planes coming from Norfolk. Ruppelt, sitting back in Dayton, Ohio, didn't hear about these sightings as they were occurring. In fact, he didn't really hear about them for a couple of days. They occurred on a Saturday to a Sunday, and he was scheduled to come into Washington on Monday for other Blue Book business. And when he did, at that point, he was aware of, when he saw the headlines, what was going on with the sightings. This slide just shows some members of the 142nd Fighter Interceptor Squadron. These were some of the guys who were actually scrambled at the time. Here's, again, Harry Barnes with his radar screen, making markers on here to follow aircraft. At the time, that's how they did it. They put these little chips on there, and you could help gauge where the aircraft were. Ruppelt comes into Washington, D.C. area. He's on official business. They won't let him go out and do any interviews with any of the witnesses. He tries to get an official car to take him around. Oh, no, we don't have any, we can't let you do that. If you do, you're going to have to pay for it on your own dime. They said, if you want to get around and see some of these witnesses, take public transportation, take the bus. And he just thought, this is ridiculous. I just want to interview these people. Let's take the bus. I won't even get out there. Oh, and by the way, Captain, you're due back at Dayton at 5 o'clock for 5 o'clock departure time today. You cannot extend it to tomorrow, the next day, Tuesday or something like that. You've got to be out of town tonight. So they stifled him from being able to personally interview any of the people. Now, this is a lobby card from a movie about this incident which occurred, UFO. There's a person in this room who loves this movie. In fact, if this movie played every time he turned on his television, his job as an analyst would be kaput because he would just stay at the television and watch this movie UFO. Okay, it's about the incidents I'm talking about. Right in the center here, looking like Sergeant Carter on Gomer Pyle USMC is actually Captain Ruppelt. So there's a big uproar in the newspapers. I won't go through too much of the newspaper accounts. I do have them. If anyone's interested in ever seeing any of these accounts or having copies of them, let me know. What more can I say with regard to these sightings? There were a couple other good sightings I'm leaving out here just in the interests of time and to sort of move this thing up a little bit. But the week goes by. July 26th comes, another Saturday. Harry Barnes and the crew are once again at their old positions there in the Air Route Traffic Control Center. At that time, around 9 o'clock or so in the evening, a airline pilot flying in the Washington area, I think he was more up around the Baltimore area or something like that. The pilot of this aircraft and a stewardess see an object going ahead over their aircraft. They said it was going about 100 miles an hour, so it seems to me his aircraft would have been going faster than it was coming in the other direction. Anyhow, he couldn't identify it, and it looked like the glow of a cigarette, he said. That sighting is on the file. Another fellow who was a CAA, Civil Aviation Administration official, was flying in an aircraft at that same time around Baltimore. He also had a sighting. That's a little bit before 9 o'clock on the 26th. Suddenly, right at about 9 o'clock, the damnedest thing happens.